Hold on. You were telling me a story
about
on the break.
Gambarelli.
Yeah.
I went to see where the Bellisarios were from, and it was a mountainous region of Italy in Abruzzo, which is east of Rome, near the Adriatic coast, high up in the mountains. And I remember getting there on a Sunday, and for some reason on the autostrada, all the gas stations were closed. Maybe they closed on Sunday, I don't remember. But I'm really running low on gas, and I'm winding my way through the mountains trying to find this little town of Gambarelli. And I finally find the town, and I drift down into it, and my tank is literally on empty, and I'm thinking, well, I'm just going to have to find sleep in the car or something until I can get gas in the morning somewhere. And there's a gas pump sitting there, and this guy sitting back reading the paper with a stogie in his mouth, puffing away with a fedora on. And I asked him if they're open, and he went, yeah, see, yeah. So I start pumping gas. He looks at me and he said, asked me what I was doing there. And I said, well, I'm looking for my cousin, Emilio Bellisario, who I still here, family still here. He said, he asked me what my papa's name was. I said, Alberto. He said, who was your nonno? I said, Giuseppe. He said, I worked for him in Pittsburgh. Because what they would do is they would come to the United States, and then they would send for all of their friends and that in the town to come over. And my grandfather owned a construction company, developed a construction company here. He came over poor, but he developed a construction company. And they would earn money, and then they would all go back to Italy, or many of them would go back to Italy to retire. And up until the 70s and 80s, you could go into any little Italian town, and you would find in a piazza these men sitting around smoking cigars and drinking wine who spoke English because they had worked in Pennsylvania or New York or somewhere and then come back. I think that's fascinating.
It's a great story. Now, once you moved to L.A., you encountered Stephen J. Cannell. Can you tell me a little
Stephen
bit?
J. Cannell encountered me.
Yeah. How did that?
That wasn't that easy. I came out here and I kind of went to work as a freelance television director, right? And of course, commercials. I didn't do much. So I sat down on a hill in a house I rented up below the Hollywood sign. You could see the valley out of one side and downtown LA out of the other. And I sat down and I wrote a script. And the script I wrote was called 5 O'Clock Whistle. It was, of course, about the town I was raised in, set back in the probably the 20s, as I recall, a time of Union Wars. I had two. It's another long story, but I had two great uncles who were killed by coal and iron police during the Union Wars. And so I kind of wrote a story about my grandfather and what he did during that time. And it was a fictional story, and of course it was I think at the time I had in my head Bronson playing the role. So I wrote this script, 5 O'Clock Whistle. And I had a bunch of them made, and being an advertising man, I had a slick cover on it, and I even had some photographs inside, or copies of photographs of the mines at that period and the things I wanted to shoot. And I would give it to anybody who wanted to read it, and I was sitting in Paisley Productions, where I worked as a freelance director, and I was sitting in my office there, and I had a casting director come in and say to me, I'd like to cast for you and that. I said, well, if I had something going, I would. It was a slowdown time in commercials. It was a bad year, and it was not a good year to start. And she said, what's that? And I said, what's this screenplay I wrote. She said, "Can I read it?" I said, "Sure, anybody take it." So she took it. She comes back. Turns out her husband was a B film director, and he really liked it, and he wanted me to meet his agent, and he wanted me to write a script for Universal Films and that. And so I met his agent, and we went to work on a film which never did go, which I still have buried in a drawer. But during this period of time, I got to the point where I was running out of money. I'm going to give you the whole story now. That's what this is for, right? The whole story? Okay. I'm running out of money. So what I do is I have, I think, somewhere around $20,000 left. That's it, period. And I'm getting job offers to go back into advertising, be a creative director for Wellsbridge Green and places. And I know if I take that, that's it. I'm in advertising the rest of my life. I'm not going to do it. So I got it in my head that I had to buy a house. And if I bought a house, I would not lose the house. I would never do that. And then something would have to happen. That's simple. So I go about buying a house. Now, I don't have enough money to buy a house, but there's a house over in Otsego that was on sale for, I think it was somewhere around $45,000. Anyway, I put down like $15,000 of the 20 I had. I got the lady to give me, no, it was 60. It was 65. I got the lady that owned the house and was selling it to give me a second mortgage on it. Give me money on a second. The real estate lady gave me her commission on a third under the table. I mean, people just, she said, "I believe you're going to make it. I just believe you're going to make it." She gave me a third. So now I have this house, and I go, I can't lose it. This fellow who had read my screenplay takes me in to meet his agent. So meet the agent, and the agent said, I'll handle you. I'll take you on as a client. You know, the hardest thing is getting an agent when you first get started. So I said, great. I said, how long until I sell a feature script? He said, oh, you'll sell a script within a year and a half, you'll sell one. I said, I got enough money to live on 6 weeks. He said, you ever think of writing for television? I said, no. He said, well, what show would you write for? I said, I don't know. I said, there's a show on called Baa Black Sheep. I said, I was a Marine, and I'm an aviator because I was a flyer by then. I said, I'm an aviator, and I know a lot about that, so I could probably write that. So he says, all right, and he gets me an interview with this executive story editor of Baa Black Sheep. The executive story editor takes me in to meet the supervising producer, Phil Daguerre. And Phil Daguerre sits there and says, oh no, the executive story editor says, come up with some story ideas. I'm going to take you into Phil Daguerre. So I go into Phil Daguerre. I said, okay. And he said, okay, you got a deal. I called my agent and said, now what? He said he liked it. I just pitched him a story idea. He told me, go write a script. He said, well, write the script. I said, how long do I have? He said, well, how long will it take you to write a script? I said, a week? He said, okay, write it in a week. So I write this script in a week. While I'm writing the script, sitting there with a typewriter on the kitchen table, and outside up pulls a truck, what they call in Australia a ute, a pickup truck with a camper back. And out gets my uncle, Paul Zatkoff, my Aunt Mary, my dad's sister. They just travel the United States, in this vehicle. I hadn't seen him in years. So they come in and we talk and everything. And my uncle, he worked in the automobile industry in Detroit, but he had been a coal miner for a great deal of his life. and he had these big gnarly hands. But he made these gold crosses, which are Russian Orthodox. My mother was Russian Orthodox. Originally, she became Catholic. And he gave me this and said, "This is going to bring you luck." So I put it on. I've never had it off since. Anyway, he leaves. I took the script. I turned it in, and I'm thinking, boy, they're gonna hate it and this and that. So I get a phone call. Steve Cannell wants to see you. And I go, oh boy, here it comes. Who's told you you could write for television? You know, you're a commercial writer. Blah, blah. So I'm sitting outside Steve's office, and sitting, waiting. I had like a 1 o'clock meeting. It's 1:30, 1:45, and Grace, his secretary, tells me, "Okay, Steve will see you." So as I walk through the door, Steve Cannell, who's probably, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years younger than me, goes like this, and he says, "Where have you been?" And I said, "Well, I've been sitting out there since 1:30. He said, No. Where have you been hiding all this time?" And he picked up the script, and he said, "I can shoot this just as you wrote it." He drops it on the desk. He said, "Now, how would you like to be my story editor? Get picked up next season." And I said, "I don't know what a story editor does." He says, "Story editor is somebody I chain to a typewriter, and he turns out scripts." I said, "I'd like that." You know? So he said, "Okay, in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass the word on the lot about you, because we're going to wait for a pickup. We're making our last show. Your script is going to be the last show we shoot this season." So he passes the word. The next thing I know, I'm doing a Del Vecchio for Bochco. I'm doing a Kojak. I'm doing a, what was it? I can't remember the name of the show now, with RJ and, I just don't remember the name of the show. And I'm doing something called Big Hawaii, which was a new show. And I turned all this out in about 6 weeks. 4 scripts. And I found a candy store. I mean, I made as much money as I had made back in advertising with all the titles and everything I had. So Baba Black Sheep got picked up. I became the story editor on it. Within 3 episodes, because I've been making film, I've been producing film, first thing I said to Steve is, can I get involved in casting? Can I get involved in editing? I've done all this stuff. Can I get involved in production? And he said, yeah. So he made me a producer right away. And what I did is I looked for the vacuums in the system. I looked where somebody was not doing the job. I did it. And so he made me a producer, and the show did not get picked up for another year. And I got a call from Glenn Larson. Would I come over and work on a show he was doing called Galactica as supervising producer? So I went over. I became a supervising producer on Galactica. I wrote a 2-hour show. He had another fellow on there, Paul Playden, who was doing a 2-hour, and Paul was supposed to go first. Paul wasn't ready. My 2-hour went. Paul still wasn't ready. He asked me to write another 2-hour, so I did another 2-hour. And I'm supervising producer. I'm doing this. That goes on. Did it for 1 season. Then they asked me at Universal if I would go down and take over Jack Klugman on as the exec producer on Klugman's show, Quincy. Sure. So I go down, and I work that summer putting together scripts for Jack Klugman. And Jack comes back, and there had been 2 writers on the show, young boys that were working for me, that Jack called in on their script, and he was giving them notes, and he was changing everything and that. And I walked in they came back and told me, Jack wants this and this and this. He wants this too compressed, and he wants this done, and this and this and this. And I just walked into Jack and said, you know what, Jack? You don't need me. You're the exec producer. And he got all upset and said, oh, you know, they're telling me I can't, you know, keep people and this and that. And I said, Jack, I'm sorry. I don't need to just be your yes guy, you know. So I went upstairs and said, hey guys, I don't want to do this. So they said, okay, we'll put you in development. So I sat down and I start developing projects. You want me to keep going?
Now, were you still working on Galactica at the time, or had you left it completely?
No, I'd left Galactica completely.
Now, Larson, had you met him before on a series called Switch?
Nope.
No? Had never worked with him before?
On what?
A series called Switch?
Well, I did Switch with Steve Cannell.
Okay, I didn't know
Not
if
Glenn
Larson didn't work on that show.
No, Steve Cannell came up with Dennis Weaver. No, it wasn't Switch. I did a Switch script. That's right. Steve Cannell came up with a show for Dennis Weaver. I can't remember the name of it now. And he made me co-exec on it with him. It went 5 episodes or something. So I'm just in my office and I start creating some ideas for TV series. I remember doing 3 ideas. And I get a call from Charlie Engle. And Charlie Engle said, I'd like you to meet... Wait. God. Memory plays tricks back that many years. Before that happened, I get a call from Glenn Larson. Glenn calls me in, and he said, how'd you like to direct a pilot for me in Hawaii? I said, love that, Glenn. You know, so he hands me this script called Magnum. So I go home and I read it, and it was not the best script I'd ever read. It was a rip on 007. And it was about a guy, a private eye named Magnum, who was ex-CIA, who lived on a house on a cliff, and he had this ferocious killer dog that kept everybody at bay, and he would fly hang gliders with machine guns on the wings, and you know, I'll never forget the opening of it. He walks into a club in Honolulu, and he's got a beautiful girl on his arm, and he looks around and sees something, and they sit down, and he says, go powder your nose. And she says, what? I don't have to. He says, go powder your nose. And she goes to the restroom, and all hell breaks loose, and he shoots, and it kills about 3 or 4 people that are trying to kill him. And then she comes out, and he said, that's why I wanted you to powder your nose. And he walks out the door with her, right? So I'm just shaking my head, saying, I don't even know if I want to do this. You know, it's a great opportunity for me to shoot a pilot, but not this. So I get a call from Charlie Engle, and Charlie Engle says to me, Tom Selleck wants to sit down with you and I. And I said, yeah, Tom, I know Tom, because Tom had done 2 pilots with Steve Cannell. One with Jimmy Whitmore called Gypsy Warriors, and one called Boston and Kilbride with Jimmy Whitmore. And neither one of them got picked up. In fact, Tom did, I think, 5 pilots or 6 pilots, and none of them got picked up with him. In fact, one of them got picked up, but they didn't pick him up. That was early on. So I sat down at La Serre with Tom and with Charlie, and Tom said, I'll pound roofing nails before I shoot this shit. He didn't say shit. Tom doesn't swear. He doesn't swear. He doesn't swear. He said, before I'll shoot this. And I said, so what do you want? He said, I remember a script you wrote for Gypsy Warriors, because I did. Steve Cannell asked me one Friday, CBS wants to see a sample script. They'd already seen the pilot. They want a sample script. Can you get me a script by Monday? So I stayed there all weekend and turned a script in on Monday. Then Steve came back to me on Thursday and said, can you get me another script by Monday? And I said, no, Steve, I need a week at least to get another script out. Anyway, Tom had read those scripts that I wrote, which evidently didn't impress CBS because they never picked that show up. But Tom had read them, and he liked my writing. And he told Charlie, I'd like him on this project. So I said, okay. And I talked with Tom, and he said, I really like your writing. And I said, well, tell me something about you, Tom. Tell me something about it. He said, I just don't want to play what I look like. You know, everybody wants to always play me as the handsome leading guy. I really want to do something with some humor. I said, okay. So I had a show that I was developing. Remember, I was in development. One of the 3 shows I was developing was a thing called H.H. Flynn. And H.H. Flynn was about a fella, about 3 Vietnam vets. Rick, who had a club down in Long Beach called the Americana Club, where he thought he was Humphrey Bogart. T.C., who flew helicopters out to the oil rigs off the California coast. And H.H. Flynn, who was a private investigator who lived in the guest house in Bel Air of the Flowers to the Stars guy, the guy that was the biggest seller of flowers arrangements to the stars. And what he would do is he would drive his Ferrari, that guy's Ferrari, around as a front. Then he'd drive home at night through the gates. He'd change into a pair of, topsiders, Levi's, a relaxed shirt, and jump in a Jeep and go down to the club where he hung out with Rick and T.C. So I thought, I'll take that and I'll create a series from it. So I went in to Glenn and I said, tell you what, Glenn, Tom doesn't want to do it with you. I'll write it. I'll take it over. It'll be my show. We'll split the creative credit. I walked out. Glenn never saw another thing until the show was done. I showed it to him. Now, I had never been to Hawaii, and I wrote it from a Fodor's travel book, which was a 1955 Fodor's travel book. I still have it. Kind of a pinkish cover on it. And I'll never forget, when I first went to Hawaii to scout for the shoot, I was stunned because the Hawaii I wrote about didn't have tall buildings downtown and all this stuff. You know, I wrote about Hawaii 1955. And that's what started it. I did Magnum. It became a huge hit. Made me instantly.
Now, what could you tell me, first of all, did you have to change a lot once you realized that Hawaii wasn't quite what you thought it was once you were there? How much rewriting did you have to do on that?
I didn't really have to do a lot of rewriting because what I did was this. I said, you know what? Rather than rewrite this to make it for Hawaii today, we're going to make it for Hawaii the way it was. When we shoot this, I don't want to see a condo. I don't want to see a telephone pole. I don't want to see a 4-lane road. I want to see palm trees. I want to see beaches, empty beaches. I want to see narrow roads through sugarcane fields. And that's what I did and created this image. I said, give me Hawaii. I said, think of it this way. Give me Hawaii before the war, before World War II. Give me that Hawaii. And that's what we created. And sometimes directors going over there didn't believe me. I remember I was looking at dailies one day, and I called, and I said, you have Tom walking on the beach with condos behind. I said, yes, beautiful beach, beautiful shot and everything. I said, well, you're going to reshoot it without the condos. I don't want to see condos. Now, if we're in downtown Honolulu, yes, you can show downtown Honolulu. But otherwise, I want this kind of beautiful, almost Tahiti look to the show. Anyway, that's how Magnum got created.
Now, prior to Magnum, some would say that the portrayal of Vietnam veterans on television was typically leaned toward the people that had suffered from shell shock.
It was very negative prior to me. You know, it's very interesting. I saw a movie the other night that is a very, very well done movie. It's a very well acted movie. It's a very good story. Everything about it is good, for me, except one thing. And it's called The Valley of Elah, which I'm sure you may have seen. It portrays the military exactly the way the military was portrayed after Vietnam in films and TV. That everybody comes back so fucked up, unable to function, killers, or, you know, I'm seeing it all over again. Exactly. I'm seeing Hollywood put out an image. And the thing that bothers me personally about the film is it's so bloody good. It's a good film. It's good acting. It's good storytelling. Except it leaves an image of people who served that I don't think is accurate. Because Vietnam was exactly the same way. And when I created Magnum, I got thousands of letters from Vietnam veterans thanking me for portraying Vietnam veterans who were something other than killers and drug addicts and crazy and, you know, unable to function in society. Not that that wasn't a, I never did the image of the guys that they had been in Vietnam and it was just a waltz for them. They just loved it. I never did that. It had been a terrible experience. In fact, the key to Magnum was that after all the tours of duty he did, he was an Annapolis graduate, all the tours of duty, I think he did 3 tours in Vietnam. He just, when the Vietnam War kind of ended, he just didn't know what to do. And he just decided, he woke up one day, and this was the key to the whole show, he woke up one day, realized he was 35 and had never been 25, and decided he was going to be 25 and have a good time. So he was affected by it, and so was TC, and so was Rick. But it was quite a departure for television at that time, or for films. And the Village Voice did an article which said that they thought it was a seminal moment in television, a changing to an acceptance of Vietnam veterans that had been a long time coming, and that a switch was being made, and that it had started with this. It was just time to do it, and Magnum was doing it.
How important was the casting to that?
Oh, it was extremely important. Tom Selleck, you know, Magnum wouldn't have been Magnum without Tom, and if I may so humbly say, it wouldn't have been Magnum without me. I mean, like I say, Tom's the same guy that made those pilots that never got picked up. I mean, what were they? All the networks all stupid about that. You know, it just worked. I knew how to write for Tom. I knew how to take advantage of Tom's gifts in acting. Tom used to say it himself. Tom used to say, I'm a reactor, not an actor. Boy, he's not quite true. I never believed that. But he was good at reacting. He was good at listening. He was good at reacting. He was good at having fun with the character. And that was really important.
How about the supporting cast?
How about what?
The supporting cast?
Oh, the supporting cast? Well, TC, that's interesting. Roger Mosley comes in, and Roger Mosley carried a chip this big on his shoulder, right? And Roger Mosley came in to the reading and for TC and loaded with attitude. He walks out the room and everybody turns and says, whoa, you know, he's not even interested in doing this. I said, yes, he is. Didn't you notice he was wearing a leather flight jacket? Do you think he'd be wearing a leather flight jacket if he wasn't interested in the role? So Roger, and by the way, Tom is the one who brought Roger to my attention. Tom had done a movie with Roger, a prison film with Roger, which he then tried, after Magnum became successful, to buy all the negatives up on. But he was never able to do it. He hated the film. And Higgins is very interesting. Higgins is a character that, while I was writing Magnum, I watched a movie on TV called The Guns of Batassi, I think it was, with Richard Attenborough. And Richard Attenborough played a British sergeant major in a country that was being nationalized in Africa. And there were two factions fighting for control of the country, and caught in the middle were the British citizens in this small town where they had these guns, Batassi. And Richard Attenborough would not allow the one faction to take the wounded leader of the other faction because he was going to kill him. And he held them off. And the next day, the thing was over. Britain recognized the faction that was the faction that was trying to get this guy. And Richard Attenborough had picked the wrong side. And as a regimental sergeant major, his whole career, 30-some years in the British Army, he was going to be cashiered because he had embarrassed the British government. I'll never forget Richard standing at the bar. He couldn't believe this. And he had a whiskey, and there was a picture of the Queen hanging behind the bar. And he picked up the whiskey, and he flung it at the picture and shattered the glass on the picture of the Queen. And then immediately was horrified at what he did and ran behind the bar and picked it all up and cleaned it all off and hung the picture back up on the wall and turned around, put his swagger stick under his arm, and walked off. That was the end of the film, across the grinder into Robin's Nest in Hawaii. I thought, he's perfect. He's the major domo for the Robin's Nest. And that was Richard Attenborough was my pattern for that. And John Hillerman, whom many people don't know, is a Texan from Houston who went to New York and learned how to do a mid-Atlantic accent to get rid of his Texas accent. And when I brought him in to read, they insisted that he read, and they said, "Well, they said to me, he's not English, he's not British." I said, "Listen to the man. How can you know, he's an actor. He can play the part, right?" So they went along with it. The other thing they didn't want me to do is they didn't want me to deal with Vietnam. The network did not want me to deal with Vietnam. The network said, why do you have to have these Vietnam flashback scenes in this pilot? I mean, nobody hates that war. I mean, everybody hates that war. Nobody likes that war. Why do you have to have this? You know, do without it. And I said, no, it's integral to the characters. It's integral to the building of the characters. Nobody's going to like that. Nobody's going to like Vietnam. We don't want Vietnam in there. And I said, I'll tell you what. Let me shoot the pilot. And after you see it, if you don't want the Vietnam scenes in it, I'll cut them out. Knowing that there was no way they could cut out. They were blended like this with the picture. And when they saw the pilot, they went, oh no, that's pretty good.
Nice. Now let me ask you a bit about the character of Robin Masters. Where did he
Sheldon,
come from?
Well, he was kind of a Sheldon Leonard writer and character, and a lot of people don't know this, but Robin Masters his voice was done by Orson Welles. And it was near the end of Orson's life, and he was so obese. I mean, he'd have to arrive in an ambulance.
How did that casting come about?
I just thought it'd be great to get Orson Welles' voice, and said, could I get, let's try and see if we can get Orson Welles. And Orson would do anything for money at that point. And there's a sad story. But he came in and he did the voice of Robin Masters. And Robin Masters was never Higgins. People say that all the time. I mean, you'll see, if you look at it, you'll see Robin Masters' hand on a drink in a private jet, talking on a phone to Higgins early on, the first year or something like that. I also made a decision that the first year of Magnum, he would not get involved with any women, which the network. They want put him with a sexy girl and bet him. And he's betting sexy women, and I said, no, it's not who the character is. And when the second year came around, I said, okay, now I got to figure out why he didn't do that the first year. Because I don't work. It's my whole career. I don't work in advance. I just let it come and develop. And then I went, because he's still being faithful to his wife, who he thinks is dead, but she's not. And that left me off on that beginning of year 2. And created that story arc, which was very good.
Which we will get to in a second. I'm going to ask you, though, about a couple of trademark items in the show. We've already talked about the red Ferrari a bit. Mm-hmm. How about the Tiger's baseball cap?
That's Tom.
Completely Tom?
Completely Tom. Tom said, what do you think if I wear a Tiger's baseball cap? It was completely Tom.
And the cross rings that the three of them wore?
Oh, the Croix de Guerre? That was me. That's the symbol of the French Resistance. And that's what that was about. Because originally, in the pilot, Robert Loggia was in it, and he was French Resistance or French background. And so that's why they had the rings.
Okay. And being an aviator, you wrote, I'm sure, a number of things having to do with TC's use of the helicopter. For the actual stunts, however, did you ever have any accidents or anything on set?
Yeah, we had one man killed. Davy Jones was our aerial coordinator, and best in the business. And here's where political correctness gets you in trouble. Roger Mosley was very upset that Davy would, for shots of the helicopter, once we had Mosley here, and you do a takeoff with the camera and that, but were shots where we're flying air to air, and he's going by, and it's distance, and Tom's on the other side. So Tom you always knew because you saw the colorful shirt. And Davy would put a black ski mask on, Davy Jones, and he'd fly with a black ski mask. So on the shots that you saw, the helicopter go by. You couldn't tell. You just knew the man flying the helicopter was black. And he was very upset, and he wanted a black helicopter pilot flying it. We had to find one. So Davy Jones kept looking and looking and looking for one that was qualified to do the kind of flying, which is a different kind of flying than just flying, that we needed to do. And he finally came up with a fellow to satisfy Roger and the that whole NAACP thing in it. So Roger, this fella, wanted to show that he was as good as Davy, and he wasn't. And one day, Davy kept saying to him, "You don't need to fly that low, going over the waves. You just don't need to do it. I'm on top in a camera ship shooting you. I can't tell if you're 5 feet or 50 feet off the deck." But, he just wanted to show I can fly as good as he can. And the truth is he couldn't. And he caught a skid in a wave, and the chopper went over, and the young man who was the camera technician who was wearing Tom's shirt that day, doubling Tom, was killed. The blades went through him, and his body was never recovered because it happened off the reef, and there's sharks out there. Throw all that blood in the water, and you never find him.
Well, let's move on to some of the specific episodes that you may
God.
wish to say
Specific
something
episodes?
about. Well, I have them here. The one
have a
we're
couple
interested
that
in.
I would.
Don't eat the snow in Hawaii.
That's a pilot.
Again, how much of their backgrounds do we find out about in that? How are we introduced to the three of them?
How much of their background?
TC and Magnum and that group.
Well, you did flashbacks. I did flashbacks all through that to Vietnam to show how tight they were in Vietnam and together. And so it was critical. That's why I couldn't cut it out, because it did explain their characters. Rick was an interesting character that the network never cared for. In my head, Rick was, to deal with Vietnam when he was there, Rick went into this mode where he was doing Bogart into Have and Have Not. Was it To Have and Have Not, or was it no, it was Rick's Cafe Americana. No, it's the famous one.
Oh, it's Casablanca.
Casablanca. He's doing Rick in Casablanca. He's doing Bogart in Casablanca. So he got, the jacket and everything. In fact, he even went and got a jacket. They found one of Bogart's white jackets for him in that. And Larry did a bad Bogart, okay? But that was the point. That's what I wanted. And the network said, no, he's doing a bad Bogart. I said, yeah, that's what makes it so great,
Larry Manetti.
Yeah. He's doing this Bogart character, and he just did it to handle Vietnam. He couldn't handle Vietnam, so he went into this Bogart character in Vietnam. And they said, no, you can't do it. So to keep Larry in the show, I said, and it's the one thing I gave in on to them, and I never should have. I said, all right, I won't have him do the Bogart character. I'm going to keep the Vietnam flashbacks. All right, I won't do it.
China Doll.
China Doll. That was the first one that I directed. I can't tell you. I remember the story, but I wish I could tell you something about it, that it stems from something. It didn't. I can give you a little story about the shooting of it. When we were filming China Doll, she was on the beach at Waikiki, and dying, and Magnum, Tom, comes running down the beach, drops down beside her. Okay. Now, we were shooting on Waikiki when there's people are all out there on the beach. Nobody ever looked twice at him going by. Nobody ever went like, oh, wow, and that guy's something, you know? It was just like, oh, they're shooting something. A commercial, what is it now? 1 year later, after the show was done, and been on the air for a year, we had Tom's double, who looked a lot like Tom, had a mustache, big guy, wore the shirt, driving the Ferrari through downtown Honolulu, and 5,000 people came out and stopped everything in downtown Honolulu. And we couldn't get the shot, and they crowded all in, and the police said after that, you cannot shoot in downtown Honolulu with that Ferrari. It just stops everything. And I remember Tom and I sitting in a bar the beginning of the second year, and he's sitting there, and we're having a drink, and I said, Tom, look down the bar. And he said, yeah, what? I said, what? Look at those two guys sitting down the bar. They've got your mustache, they've got the Hawaiian shirt, they've got the Levi's, they've got the loafers.
All they were missing was the hat.
Right. All they was missing was Tom. But what I'm trying to compare it to is that his character in that film and what he brought to it and what I gave him to bring to it changed. You know, people went crazy for that. But shooting China Doll, nobody had seen an episode of Magnum yet. It was only we were just filming it. Nobody paid any attention.
Did you see the sunrise?
Did you see the sunrise? Yeah, that was. I always liked that one. I always liked that one. Let's see. I had Bo Svensson was in that. He played the heavy in there. And Did You See the Sunrise? And that's where. What was it? Oh God, he's a friend of mine. I can't get the name right now. I'll come back to that one.
But what happens in that episode?
Well, his buddy, whose name I can't get right now, gets blown up in the car, and it was meant for Tom, Magnum, to be blown up, and instead, his Navy buddy goes to start the car and gets blown up. And it flashes back to Bo Svensson, who had them all as prisoners in Vietnam and who had killed one of them, shot him in the femoral artery when they were hanging in cages. And Jimmy Whitmore Jr. was in that. And was he in Did You See the Sunrise? I think so. And the thing that happened in that episode in Did You See the Sunrise that was so different in television was at the end of it, Bo Svensson is standing there, and Tom knows he's killed his friend. Tom knows he shot him and killed another one of the team in Vietnam. And Bo Svensson is under the protection of being a Russian citizen and in the legation, and he has that kind of protection, is about to leave the island. And he's standing there, and he says to Magnum, you can't kill me. You can't shoot me. I'm unarmed. It's not your style. It's not the American way. And he says, "Do svidaniya," and turns and starts to walk away, and we're on Tom. And Tom says, Ivan. And he turns back and says, yes. He says, did you see the sunrise this morning? And Magnum turns and boom, fires right into camera. End of episode. That was another one that went around, you can't do this, you can't, you killed him in cold blood. And I said, yeah, but the guy really deserved it. And it was the reason he said, did you see the sunrise? And, things are coming back to me that I probably skipped here because it's part of it, is that his buddies said, let's drive up to the Pally and watch the sunrise, and jumped in the car to start it, and it got blown up. So he said, did you see the sunrise this morning? And he shoots him in cold blood. We got about 95% of the mail that came in agreed with it. 5% didn't. But it was an amazing number of people who agreed with it. But then again, I made Bo so bad. I mean, it was like, just about the same as shooting Hitler. I mean, made him really a bad character. Jeff McKay played the other character. That's the name I was trying to think of. Jeff McKay was his buddy that got blown up. And I then put Jeff, after that, I did that and killed Jeff, who was kind of a semi-regular on the show, to go into a show I was making called Tales of the Gold Monkey. And Jeff went into that show, and that show was on for a year. And I patterned that kind of after To Have and Have Not. Guy running around in the 30s, one of them's an alcoholic, and the other guy takes care of him. Instead of being the captain of a boat, as Bogart was, he had a plane, and it lasted a year, and then it went off the air. And Jeff said to me, you got to bring me back on Magnum, man. I said, how can I bring you back? I blew you up. He said, well, maybe Magnum's walking down the beach and I just come out of the sky smoking and land next to him. I said, Jeff, I can't bring you back. And he hammered at me. Man, I need to come back. I need to be back on the show. So I went, okay. I know how I'm going to bring you back. And I brought him back. He's walking down the street. Magnum sees him and starts to follow him and can't believe it, And he's dead ringer. It's him. And when Jeff's character finds out about it, he uses it against Magnum. Now, prior to that, Jeff McKay's character was always the one being used by Magnum, frankly, being donuts to get some. He was a naval intelligence officer, get information and that. And I said, now here's what we're going to do. We're just doing a switch. Now you're going to use Magnum. You're going to find out what happened, and you're going to use his guilt on him. So you're really a nasty guy. But Jeff could never do it. He could never really go there. He was so used to playing the good guy that he just couldn't quite make the shift.
Were there any other episodes that stand out in your mind that you'd like to discuss?
Well, the most important episode to me in the series was Home from the Sea, because that was an episode in which the whole thing was Magnum floating on a surf ski, and he gets knocked off early in the teaser. He gets knocked off, and he's caught in the Molokai current. He's being swept out. Next stop is Tahiti, and he kept treading water, and he began to remember his dad and things his dad taught him. His dad telling him never quit, never give up, never stop, always keep going. And that's the only thing that kept him going, because he was in the water, treading water for, I think, 2 days. And at one point, a shark starts circling him, and his remembers his dad telling him when something bad's about to happen, you think it is, just close your eyes and wish it away. Wish it away. And he did. The shark just disappeared. But the most satisfying thing for me about that episode was that I received a phone call, or a letter. I received a letter from a woman whose daughter was in a cancer ward, and she was dying of cancer. And the hotel was next door that all the parents stayed in, and they would come over and they'd get together in the TV room in the evening with their children who were terminal, for the most part, cancer patients. And somebody said, what do we want to watch tonight, you know? And somebody said, let's watch Magnum. Somebody else said, no, that's not for the appropriate. But anyway, they decided to watch Magnum. And she said at the end of that episode, everybody in the room was crying. They were hugging their children. And she said, we were vowing we would never give up. And I used to receive a card from her every year saying that her daughter was still alive. And I received those cards for about 8 years. She never wrote me that her daughter died, but I assume she probably did.
What was your reaction to the show's multiple Emmy nominations?
You're speaking too soft for me.
What was your reaction to the show's multiple Emmy nominations?
Oh, I thought it was great. I just would have liked to have gotten Bochco out of the equation at that time. Because Bochco was winning everything for all the years Magnum was on, you know. We got a lot of Emmy nominations. I mean, Tom won an Emmy. John Hillerman won an Emmy. We won a lot of Emmys. We never won an Emmy for Best Show. You know, I wish we had, but we didn't.
And the whole time, how was it doing in the ratings?
Oh, it was through the roof. Except it came up against heavy competition, which nobody thought was going to be a competition, because sitcoms were dead. And then The Cosby Show came on, and we went up against Cosby. And we took a real blow when we went up against Cosby.
Didn't Bill Cosby once, in reference to that, wear a tiger's cap on an episode of Cosby?
I think he did, yeah. I think he did.
So how would you describe your relationship with the Standards and Practices Department at CBS?
Oh, you know, I would sit down at the beginning of a year and I would say to Standards and Practices, look, guys, ours is always going to be an adversarial relationship. And they'd go, no, you know. I said, no, wait. Your job, the ideal job, is that you never get one letter of complaint. And my job is to entertain people the way I feel I should, and that's going to generate some letters of complaint. So there's no way that we can't not be in an adversarial position. Because you're going to say, oh, God, this letters came in about this, you know, Magnum killed and him in cold blood. We don't want that. By the way, a lot of advertisers pulled out of that episode. But it was an enormously well-received episode and remembered.
Well, we're going to have to stop tape.